The city sidewalk buzzed with its usual noise, honking cars, hurried footsteps, street vendors calling out deals. Stephen walked briskly through it all, his phone pressed to his ear, mind fixed on meetings and deadlines. He wore a tailored coat, the kind that made people assume he belonged somewhere important. At his side, his young son struggled to keep pace, clutching a small backpack with both hands. They were almost at the corner when a soft voice broke through the chaos. "Please, anything helps." Stephen didn't look. He had learned not to. In a city like this, stopping meant falling behind. He tightened his grip on his phone and took another step forward. The voice came again, closer this time. "Sir, please." A woman sat on the cold pavement near the subway entrance, wrapped in a worn blanket that barely shielded her from the wind. Her hair was unkempt, her face lined with exhaustion. A small cardboard sign rested against her knee, the words faded from rain and time. Stephen felt a flicker of discomfort, but he buried it. He guided his son past her without slowing. "Come on," he muttered, more to himself than to the child. They took 3 steps. Then the boy stopped. Stephen felt the tug on his sleeve and turned back impatiently. "What is it?" "We're late." The boy didn't answer. He was staring behind them, eyes fixed on the woman by the subway entrance. His face had gone pale, curiosity replaced by something heavier, confusion, maybe recognition. "Dad," the boy said softly. Stephen sighed. "We talked about this. We can't stop every time." "Dad," the boy repeated, louder now, his voice trembling. People passed around them, some glancing, most indifferent. The woman lowered her head, as if she already knew she had been dismissed. The boy took a step backward, toward her. Stephen frowned. "Hey, what are you doing?" The boy didn't take his eyes off the woman. His small hands clenched into fists, as if holding onto a thought too big to let go. "Dad," he whispered, then swallowed hard. Stephen followed his gaze at last. For a brief moment, his eyes met the woman's, and something stirred. Not recognition. Not yet. Just an unease he couldn't explain. Then his son spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper, but strong enough to stop time itself. "Dad, that's Mom." The world around them seemed to fall silent. Stephen felt a sharp laugh escape his throat before he could stop it. Not because the moment was funny, but because it felt impossible. "Don't say things like that," he said quickly, glancing around. "That's not your mom." The boy didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the woman sitting by the subway entrance. "It is," he insisted. "I remember her." Stephen shook his head. "You're confused. You were very little when your mother—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "When she left." The woman shifted uncomfortably, pulling the blanket closer around her shoulders. She kept her head down, but her hands were trembling. The sound of the boy's voice had reached her, Stephen could tell. A few passers-by slowed their steps. A couple whispered to each other. Someone across the street lifted a phone, sensing something emotional unfolding. Stephen knelt in front of his son, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. We don't know this woman. We can't just—" "Dad, look at her," the boy interrupted. "Her eyes. They're the same." Stephen turned again, reluctantly. The woman's face was partially hidden by her hair, but when she glanced up, their eyes met for a second time. This time, the unease deepened. There was something familiar in her gaze, something that made his chest tighten. She looked away immediately, shame flooding her expression. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Her voice. Stephen froze. It was hoarse, worn by years of hardship, but beneath it was a tone he hadn't heard in a long time. A tone buried under memory and regret. "No," Stephen said, standing up abruptly. "This is a misunderstanding. My son is mistaken." The boy grabbed his hand. "Dad, please. Ask her." Stephen hesitated. He felt eyes on him now. The crowd wasn't large, but it was enough to make him uncomfortable. This was becoming a scene. The woman slowly rose to her feet, unsteady. She was shorter than Stephen remembered, but then again, he wasn't sure what he remembered anymore. She studied the boy's face carefully, as if afraid to breathe. "How old are you?" she asked him softly. 8, the boy replied without hesitation. Her breath caught. Stephen noticed it immediately. That's not possible," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The woman looked at Stephen then, really looked at him. Pain, recognition, and disbelief collided in her eyes. "Stephen," she whispered. Hearing his name from her lips sent a shock through his body. His heart began to pound. Memories he had buried, arguments, hospital rooms, unanswered calls, started clawing their way back. Around them, the city kept moving. Cars passed. People whispered. Phones recorded. And for the first time since he had walked past her, Stephen wasn't sure he could walk away again. What would you do if a single sentence shattered everything you thought you knew? And tell us, what country and city are you watching from? Stephen felt the weight of the moment pressing down on his chest. The sound of his name still echoed in his ears, soft but unmistakable. No, he said again, more firmly this time. That's not possible. The woman flinched at his tone. For a second, she looked like she might sit back down, retreat into the invisibility she had been living in for years. But the boy stepped forward before she could. Dad, he said, his voice shaking, she knows your name. Stephen looked at his son, then back at the woman. His mind raced, searching for logic, for anything that could explain this away. Coincidences happened. Names were common. Faces could deceive memory. But his heart wasn't listening to logic. The woman wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. I never meant for this to happen, she said quietly. I didn't think I'd ever see either of you again. Stephen swallowed hard. If you know me, then tell me something only she would know. The words came out colder than he intended. The woman nodded slowly. You hate black coffee, but you drink it anyway because you think it makes you look strong. You still sleep on the right side of the bed. And when you're nervous, you rub your thumb against your ring finger. Stephen's breath caught. Without realizing it, he stopped rubbing his thumb. The boy looked up at him, eyes wide. Dad, she knows you. A small crowd had formed now. People pretended to check their phones but stayed close enough to listen. The city noise faded into a dull hum, as if the world itself had leaned in. Stephen's voice dropped. Where have you been? The woman hesitated, shame washing over her face. Lost, she said simply. Sick. Alone. I tried to reach you, but I thought you were better off without me. Stephen shook his head. You disappeared. You left us. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was pushed out, she whispered. By fear. By misunderstanding. By things I didn't know how to fight back then. The boy stepped closer to her, close enough that Stephen could have reached out and pulled him back, but he didn't. The child studied her face, then smiled sadly. You look like the picture Dad keeps in his drawer. Stephen stiffened. He had forgotten about that picture. Or at least, he had pretended to. The woman's knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the railing for support. Years of pain, poverty, and regret weighed on her thin frame. Stephen felt something crack inside him. This wasn't a stranger anymore. This was a past he had refused to face, sitting right in front of him. If you were standing there, would you face the truth no matter how painful it is, or would you walk away to protect yourself? Comment, face it or walk away. Stephen took a slow step closer, his eyes never leaving the woman's face. Up close, the changes were impossible to ignore, her cheeks hollow, her hands rough, the life drained from her in ways time alone couldn't explain. And yet, beneath all of it, he could still see her. The woman he once loved. The woman he thought he had lost forever. Tell me the truth, Stephen said quietly. All of it. She nodded, as if she had been waiting years to hear those words. My name is Anna, she began, her voice trembling. You used to call me Annie when you wanted to make me laugh. She paused, letting the memory settle between them. After our son was born, I got sick. You remember the hospital visits, but you didn't know how bad it was. Stephen's jaw tightened. He remembered the doctors, the hushed conversations in hallways, the bills that piled up faster than answers. You stopped coming, Anna continued softly. Not because you didn't care, but because you were scared. And when your mother told you I was unstable, that I was a burden, you believed her. Stephen flinched. She said you left, he muttered. That you didn't want the responsibility. Anna shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. I begged to see you. To see him. But the call stopped. The letters came back unopened. She looked at their son, who stood quietly between them. I thought I was protecting him by staying away. The boy reached out and took her hand without hesitation. The simple gesture made several people in the crowd wipe their eyes. Stephen felt his chest tighten painfully. Why didn't you fight harder? I was tired, she replied. And ashamed. I didn't want him to see me like this. A heavy silence followed. Even the crowd seemed to sense the weight of what was being revealed. No one interrupted. No one spoke. Stephen ran a hand through his hair. I built a life, he said quietly. A good one. I told myself you chose to disappear. Anna met his eyes. And I told myself you chose to forget. Their son looked up at Stephen. Dad, she didn't forget us. That was the moment Stephen understood. The truth wasn't simple. There was no villain, only fear, pride, and silence that had destroyed something fragile. Stephen exhaled slowly. Years of anger drained out of him, replaced by regret so deep it made his knees feel weak. I'm sorry, he said at last. For not listening. For not coming back. Anna closed her eyes, as if the apology hurt almost as much as it healed. Around them, strangers stood frozen, witnessing something deeply personal unfold in public. No one was thinking about traffic anymore. No one was in a hurry. A broken family was finding its voice again. The air between them felt heavy, thick with words that had waited years to be spoken. Stephen looked at Anna, really looked at her, and for the first time, he stopped seeing the beggar on the sidewalk. He saw the woman who used to fall asleep on his shoulder during late-night movies, the woman who once believed their love could survive anything. After you disappeared, Stephen said slowly, I told myself it was easier this way. That our son wouldn't grow up confused or hurt. Anna gave a sad smile. And I told myself he'd be happier thinking I was gone than knowing I was broken. The boy tightened his grip on her hand. I wasn't happier, he said quietly. I just didn't know what I was missing. Those words hit Stephen harder than any accusation could have. Anna took a shaky breath. When I left the hospital, I had nothing. No job, no money, no support. Every door I knocked on closed. I kept thinking, just get through one more day. Then one day became years. Stephen felt shame burn in his chest. He had been building success while she had been fighting to survive. I never stopped loving him, she continued, brushing her thumb gently over the boy's knuckles. I just didn't think I deserved to be his mother anymore. Stephen's eyes filled with tears he hadn't allowed himself in years. You deserved better, he said hoarsely. From me. The crowd had grown quieter, more respectful now. Even those recording lowered their phones, as if sensing this wasn't a moment meant for spectacle. Stephen knelt in front of Anna, ignoring the cold pavement beneath his knees. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. I failed you, he said. I failed our family. Anna reached out instinctively, stopping him from bowing his head further. We both failed by staying silent. Their son stepped forward and wrapped his arms around them both, his small body bridging the distance that pride and fear had created. I don't want you to go away again, the boy said softly. Stephen closed his eyes, holding them both. I won't, he promised. Not ever. For the first time, Anna allowed herself to cry freely, not from pain, but from release. Around them, strangers wiped tears, some whispering prayers, others simply watching in awe. This wasn't just a reunion. It was the moment the truth finally shattered years of misunderstanding. And nothing, Stephen knew, would ever be the same again. Stephen slowly helped Anna to her feet, steadying her as if she might disappear again if he let go. She was light, too light, and that realization alone filled him with quiet anger at himself. He slipped off his coat and gently placed it around her shoulders without asking. She hesitated for a second, then accepted it, clutching the fabric as though it were something sacred. Let's get you somewhere warm, Stephen said. Anna shook her head instinctively. I don't want to be a burden. You were never a burden, he replied, firm but gentle. Not then. Not now. Their son looked up at Anna with a hopeful smile. We can go home, Mom. The word Mom seemed to break something open inside her. She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. I don't even know if I still belong there. Stephen crouched so he was eye level with her. You belong with us, he said. Whatever it takes. We'll figure it out together. A few people in the crowd quietly stepped back, giving them space. The moment had shifted, from shock to something softer, more human. A woman nearby whispered, "This is what forgiveness looks like." Stephen reached into his pocket and handed Anna his phone. Call whoever you need. Or don't. Today isn't about fixing everything at once. Anna stared at the phone like it was a foreign object. I haven't had one in years. Then we'll start there, Stephen said simply. He stood and looked around at the onlookers. Thank you, he said, voice steady, for letting us have this moment. No one clapped. No one spoke. Respect filled the silence. As they turned to leave, the boy slipped his hand into Anna's and then into Stephen's, linking them together. It felt awkward, unfamiliar, and right. Anna glanced back once at the spot where she had been sitting moments earlier. I thought my life was over, she whispered. I didn't think second chances were real. Stephen squeezed her hand. Sometimes they're just late. They began walking down the street together, slowly, carefully, like people relearning how to move as a family. Do you believe people deserve a second chance, no matter how much time has passed? If yes, type forgiveness in the comments. Ahead of them, the city continued as always. But for three people walking side by side, everything had changed. The video appeared online that same evening. At first, it was just a short clip, grainy footage of a well-dressed man stopping in the middle of a crowded street, a child's voice trembling as he said, "Dad, that's Mom." Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Shared, reposted, slowed down, subtitled in different languages. Millions watched the moment again and again, feeling the same shock, the same ache in their chest. But what truly moved people wasn't the reveal. It was what came after. Another clip surfaced, Stephen kneeling on the cold pavement, wrapping his coat around the woman everyone had ignored. The caption read, "He walked past her, until love stopped him." Comments poured in from around the world. I judged before I understood. This made me call my mother. We never know what people are carrying. Stephen didn't speak to the media. He didn't need to. His actions said more than any interview could. Instead, he focused on rebuilding something fragile and long neglected. Anna moved into a small, quiet apartment near Stephen's home at first, not out of charity, but choice. She wanted to stand on her own again. Stephen made sure she had medical care, counseling, and time, without pressure, without conditions. Their son adjusted faster than anyone expected. Children often do. He introduced Anna proudly to his teachers as "my mom," as if the years apart had simply been a long pause rather than a permanent loss. Healing wasn't instant. Some days were awkward. Some conversations were painful. There were silences filled with grief for the years they could never get back. But there was also laughter, real, hesitant laughter that slowly returned. Stephen learned something the hard way: success doesn't mean much if it costs you empathy. He started volunteering quietly, not for recognition, but because he finally understood how close anyone could be to losing everything. Anna, once invisible on the street, began helping at a women's shelter, sharing her story with others who believed their lives were beyond repair. She didn't pretend everything was perfect, she simply showed that survival itself was an act of strength. The city moved on. New videos replaced the old ones. Algorithms found new stories. But for those who watched that clip, something lingered. A reminder that the people we ignore may carry our past. That judgment is easy, but compassion changes lives. That sometimes, the truth finds us when we least expect it. And most of all, never look away too quickly. Because love might be calling your name. If this story touched your heart, type respect in the comments, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.